Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Industrial Strength Podcast, a podcast more focused on the industrial fire departments and industrial hazmat response. My name is Randy, and I'm currently a hazmat specialist with 17 years on an industrial fire department doing hazmat. With me today, I have two co-hosts, Jeff and Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve. I'm a hazmat technician with about 10 years of industrial experience and about 3 years doing hazmat things. Our show will be covering various calls that we've had in our industry over the years and dive a little bit into details from start to finish and beyond.
Hey, thanks, Steve and Randy. My name is Jeff. I bring over 20 years of experience in the fire service, including a decade in industrial fire service. In today's episode, we'll be discussing an acid leak from a storage tank. And by the way, welcome to the inaugural episode. You're in for a great show.
Right. So to cover, when you think about tank leaks, typically you think about like failed valves, faulty bottom valves, failed gaskets. But we decided to bring you guys this call today because it wasn't any of that. It was a very non-typical call for us. So this call occurred a couple years back. It occurred during the summer. It was a moderately warm day, so sunny, no rain, wasn't overcast, mid-70s, pretty mild day. Weather didn't really affect or make worse the call, but I just wanted to say that the conditions were pretty ideal for working in, but didn't affect the nature of the leak. Around midday on the day in question, building maintenance worker happened to be walking through one of our production buildings on site and discovered a leak in an acid tank. That tank in question was like a 4,000 liter tank. It was made out of 316 stainless steel.
That's right, Randy. And this particular tank had a label on it that called out to be 60% sulfuric acid. In this case, that means 60% acid by volume, and that means that they fill the tank up with 40 or 60% of the acid, and then the remainder is 40% water, no matter how full it is. The 60% sulfuric acid in this tank is used to adjust pHs of various processes performed on the site. And the transfer out of the tank is normally done using a positive headspace pressure to move the solution from this tank down to downstream destination tanks.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. The vessel, like we said, was under pressure, and it had a hole in the sidewall of the tank. It was filled with sulfuric acid, which started to leak. When I say it was streaming out, picture a horse relieving itself. That's the volume that you were dealing with. So we had to manage both and the acid itself. Our first engineering control involved locating the leaking tank and confirming that it was made of that 3/16 steel. You know, it is designed for the corrosion resistant. Additionally, there was a 3-foot containment dike around the tank. However, in this case, it proved very ineffective, giving the volume of the acid streaming out of the side.
Yeah, agreed, Jeff. So this is one of the times, like at work, obviously in industrial facilities, engineering controls are a pretty important piece of what we do, right? So to try, instead of just dealing with something as they come, we try and engineer in safety in what we do. And for this tank in particular, we have some engineering controls we try to put in place to prevent issues. So obviously tank construction is one of those things. We use 316 stainless. Corrosion resistant, right? It's better than black steel. And so one of the other things we try to do with engineering controls is we had an impoundment dike around this tank. It was a 3-foot high impoundment dike, and it's supposed to contain the entire tank volume. But obviously, as you'll find out, we had this hole and the impoundment dike was rendered ineffective. One of the other things we like to do is we do preventive maintenance at work. We do x-ray testing, test for vessel sidewall thickness, determine how things are wearing out, when things need to be replaced. But obviously on this call, the tank construction didn't help us. The impoundment dike didn't help us. And this wasn't caught during preventive maintenance x-ray testing. So over time, what happened is the acid eroded a hole in the sidewall of that steel tank and resulted in the acid solution exiting under pressure through that hole in the sidewall tank, which really was our problem because that pressure on the vessel from that nitrogen blanket on top gave enough pressure so that leak head velocity to be escaping over that impoundment dike. So it was shooting beyond it, wasn't collecting anything, and it was spilling onto the floor directly adjacent to that tank.
Yep, that's right. And for you guys out there that are like me that think all acids are kind of the same, and you get that with acid reflux when you eat bad foods. That's not the case when it comes to this particular situation. This acid is a strong mineral acid that is used in many different industries. It's used anywhere from most common manufacturing of mineral processing, oil refining, wastewater processing, and chemical synthesis. So sulfuric acid is also found in everyday consumer products like those yummy drain cleaners and car batteries that you like to lick out there.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Concentrated sulfuric acid does exhibit several chemical behaviors, notably its ability to act as a desiccant, which is readily absorbing water and water vapor. In our area, high humidity does have a significant issue for roughly 9 months out of the year, and depending, could be 6, but which it does compound our challenges. Additionally, concentrated sulfuric acid does react vigorously with bases, releasing a substantial amount of heat. It also generates heat when it is dissolved in regular water. The heat released from sulfuric acid can be significant to ignite combustible materials upon contact. Additionally, it does pose a serious risk of severe chemical and thermal burns to the skin, not only because of the moisture in the skin, but also due to the corrosive properties of the acid. That's some great stuff right there.
For sure. So another thing about sulfuric acid, if you're unfamiliar with it, is that acids like sulfuric acid typically have a low vapor pressure. That's because most of the time acids aren't neat, and by neat I mean high purity. A lot of times they're mixed with water. And because of the high water content, it has a low vapor pressure, so it doesn't emanate a ton of vapors. You'll smell it sometimes. If an acid is strong enough, you'll see it called fuming, and it will emanate vapors, but the 60% solution isn't considered fuming. And so one of the things we had to consider was if this solution happened to be warm, just because like with warm water, it emanates steam. We had to be concerned whether this liquid itself was hot and emanating hot corrosive vapors. But luckily for us, it wasn't. So it happened to be room temperature. And once again, the temperature of the day was about 70s. So not quite hot enough to make steam. So it wasn't really an issue for us to be fuming, releasing vapors. So we were lucky in that regard.
That's right, Randy. And just like every other call that we go on, the safety of our team and the workers on the site is our number one priority. When our emergency response team arrived on the scene at the location of the leak on this particular day, there were no reported exposures or injuries due to the ongoing spill. So we were lucky in that regard. Because the tank was located within the building, it was relatively easy for us to define and isolate the hot zone to within the building itself, and then we use tape to cordon off the area to prevent accidental foot traffic. Because, at least on our site, we tend to have these looky-loos that just wander through everything, not paying attention.
Yeah, you're right, Steve, for sure. I mean, we do have a bunch of incidental, accidental foot traffic because on our site, we have a history of people just thinking that despite us being on scene, they have the right to kind of meander where they want to go. So
I've never encountered that before.
Never.
Yeah, so one critical consideration for the team was the environmental impact of the spill. The acid that had bypassed the containment dike and was spilling onto the floor, once it enters the floor drain, it goes into our sanitary sewer system. That sewer system eventually discharges back into our local waterways. Fortunately for us, that sewer system is pH monitored as a part of regulatory controls. So any significant amount of acid would be detected and then would require chemical treatment before being released off-site. So the quicker the response team could bring this leak under control, the less treatment would be needed downstream.
Yeah, you're right. So when we showed up on scene, right, so we knew that we had a leak in a tank. We knew that it was escaping the engineering controls and it was spilling onto the floor. We knew this was time sensitive because it was heading to a floor drain, and we needed to take care of that and mitigate that issue quickly so it didn't hit the floor drain and didn't, have to require treatment before we did release it to local waterways. So there were like three things that our team had to do prior to sending teams downrange to do hands-on fixing. Because one of the things we have for our team is organized as a series of technicians. We all are able to do downrange hands-on correction of problems. So the three things we needed to do quickly before we were able to go downrange and start trying to implement a fix is we wanted to assess that nature of the leak. So we needed to figure out if the leak was a solid stream, just a liquid water stream, whether there's enough pressure to make an aerosolized liquid, or if there was even high pressure making a mist. Because those three different types of streams, like whether it's a solid liquid stream like a garden hose, an aerosol, so maybe like I'm trying to think like a spray bottle or a mister making fine droplets. Each of those are different kind of contact issues you need to deal with, and it would affect the PPE we would need for this kind of call. And secondly, PPE brings up the fact that we need to determine what the right kind of PPE for this job was. So in our department, we always want to think about higher levels of responder safety. So we want to make sure our people that go downrange, do those fixes, can come out safe and sound, as safe as they went downrange. And so we wanted to make the right decision in order to determine how to keep them safe while mitigating this call.
So Randy, how did you come up with that decision?
That's a great question, Jeff. So on our team, we use a couple resources to try and determine what the right level of protections are, permeability rates. And so one of the things we like to do is, once again, being in this fixed facility, we are so lucky in the fact that we have internet connectivity. Barring some sort of major environmental disaster, we always have electrical sources. We always have internet, which is wonderful. So what I like to do typically, I'll do a lot of tech research. And one of the things I like to do is I go online. We do have hardcover books for backup in case we need them, but using things like PubChem or Cameo or NIOSH guides are invaluable for digging up information like correct PPE, maybe what the chemical will react with vigorously, measures for firefighting, measures for first aid, how far we should evacuate. So, but I like to rely on PubChem quite a bit. It's a little more nuanced to interpret than Cameo, but it's set up more like an SDS where it's got discrete sections. And if you know what section you need to dive down for to look at, you're kind of home free. So in this case, it was a combination of PubChem and Cameo that helped us with this. And luckily, sulfuric acid is one of those things. It's a pretty common mineral acid, so it was in both databases. And it's also one of those things where I've run across a handful of times where PubChem will have a chemical that Cameo might not. But I still reference both because I think Cameo might be a little more user-friendly for the novice user, and PubChem just has a ton of data, but if you know how to dig it, you're ahead of the curve. So because of that, we determined that with sulfuric acid, like level B response, we were worried more about, we're looking at liquids, right? Because we thought it might be a liquid leak, but we didn't know for certain yet until we were able to put some eyes on that spill, put eyes on that leak, and determine what we had. And the final thing we needed to evaluate in using those databases was permeation time and decon needs. And for that, we use also databases. So we have suits from particular manufacturers. And with that, we have those manufacturers' databases for permeation time and breakthrough. And so for that, we were able to look up what sulfuric acid had for us and what that meant for the suits and gloves we typically like to use. So that's kind of like how we effectively did that kind of research before we could go down range and start affecting fixes.
Yep, that's right. And on this particular call, we were able to determine that the PPE, because of the stream itself being more of a liquid stream, not having any misting or aerosolized form, that level B would be the correct PPE for our situation here. Our particular PPE suits that we wear we were able to determine that the level B suits have a greater than 480 minute permeation time, and that the gloves were greater than 240 minute permeation time. So once we selected that PPE and determined the best way to perform our decon for this particular instance in this response, the next thing to do was figure out a mitigation strategy for stopping the leak. Much like that horse pissing, our decon method was a wet water decon method in this case.
Right. And one of the things that I think we did that was nice was, being a fixed facility, we have some environmental safety controls built in, like safety showers. If I remember right, Steve, I think we set up a wet decon pool, which, once again, it's an old school decon method, right? A lot of times teams now are going towards hybrid decon through Dahlgren, or dry decon, or depending on the chemical, maybe even like vapor decon, so pushing air. But with this, because of the corrosive hazard and being a liquid, we were afraid of it adhering to suits. We decided on some old school wet decon, and if I remember right, we actually situated our pools under safety showers to kind of double up and use the safety shower as our water supply, so we didn't have to use water from another source like our engine.
Yep, that's correct, Randy. In addition to that, we actually changed our site standards to use heated water on all of our safety showers. So in this instance, it was kind of like after every one of those long workouts that you do, you want to get a nice sauna soak in there.
Yeah,
so it's kind of nice.
Better. Yeah, I agree. It's always better to get the hot water shower than the cold one. It's better to like get a little relaxation than freezing your butt off after a call.
Absolutely.
Except if you're the first one in there.
Use up all the hot water.
So, actually, in reality, this was all happening within the first few minutes of our arrival on scene. There's a lot of thinking that needs to go on. So we needed to develop a plan to address the situation, focusing how we were going to control and contain that active spill while also mitigating that acid on the floor. The team considered using absorbent socks to divert the pool of acid and soak it up. But ultimately, we did decide to use chemical-resistant spill pads to absorb the acid on the floor. However, this didn't address the primary issue of that acid still leaking from the side of the tank. So, Steve, what actions did we take to resolve this?
Well, if I remember right, Jeff, I think you might have used something you might call a little out-of-the-box thinking going back to your college days.
Yeah, possibly.
So in this particular instance, Jeff kind of thought back to pouring hydration fluids down from a second story using a funnel method, and came up with this beautiful solution of getting up on top of the tank and using some plastic sheeting that we have on our truck, lowering it down from above and taping it in place to divert the stream back down into the dike. Now,
that's called visqueen.
And for those of you out there who are unfamiliar with that, this is a polypropylene plastic that is chemical resistant to the acid that we are dealing with.
Oh, that's right. This is a technical show. I did forget about that.
Yeah, so once again, I mean, that was really a brilliant fix because, it wasn't an initial consideration, but it really redirected that stream, right? So think about damming and diking, which is like a basic hazmat skill. But, it was a way of redirecting a spill that was kind of high up, right? So it was one of those things where you couldn't easily reach it.
So, I mean, going back to that picture, it really doesn't show the height of that. But how high do you think that was? That was probably a good 8-10 feet up in the air.
Yeah, let me put it this way. If we had Shaq on our team, he couldn't have done it from ground level.
Right, yeah. Not without jumping for sure. So it was kind of high up. So one of those things that it would not have been easy to effectively do a sidewall patch or a plug, right? So it's something that we would have had to try to haul out a ladder to maybe try and get up on to take care of. So not ideal. So really, that plastic sheeting was a brilliant little idea to redirect that acid stream, that corrosive stream, back into the impoundment dike to do the job it was built to do.
Yeah, and then really to secure that visqueen, I guess, if you will, we did use that chem tape up on top of the tank to actually secure that, so so we could finish up our stuff.
Yeah, it worked out really well that way. Someone didn't have to hold it in place. So the less time we had to spend around that leak, the better off we really were.
Yep. Now, the other thing that we did in this instance is we decided to relieve the nitrogen that was creating a positive head pressure on the tank, which then slowed down the leak rate as well.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the other things I think we did was I think after we took off that head pressure, we slowed the rate of the leak, and so we still had to wait for the leak to kind of get down to that level, the hole in the sidewall, because we still were reluctant to try and get up some sort of ladder or scaffolding to get up that leak. Am I right, Jeff?
That is true.
Yeah. So I think what we wound up doing, and like I said, this is a couple of years ago, is we let it leak down to the level of the hole. So we collected all that corrosive runoff into the impoundment dike. And then I think what we did was we called our environmental contract company to come on out, which is obviously something that's like a page out of the municipal responders handbook. So we called them out to help take care of what we had in that impoundment dike.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, we did have a environmental group come out and at least clean up the rest of that. Operations didn't want us to shut the system off, so
yeah. So we also had to have the environmental company. We had them pipe into that tank, and we had to vacuum remove the rest of the contents, right? Because we can't do maintenance on a half full tank full of corrosive. You're risking having a maintenance worker get hurt doing that. So what we kind of wound up doing is we showed up on scene. We assessed the nature of the leak, found out it was a solid stream, so we weren't worried about aerosol droplets or mists. So what we wound up doing is with the acid on the floor, we wound up using spill pads to absorb that up, and we were able to get to it in time before it hit the drain, which was good for us because that way we didn't have to worry about treating that acidic corrosive waste going to our retention pond. So we didn't have to do any pH adjustment there. With your great idea about the poly sheeting, we were able to redirect the acid leak back to the impoundment dike. So we were able to contain all that, get it sucked safely into a vac truck for disposal. We removed the pressure from the tank, let it drain down, remove the rest of the tank contents. And then it was just down to decon, which worked out pretty well. Because once again, with that wet water decon with that corrosive, it came off pretty easily in that retention pond, or our decon pool. So we did that.
Because dilution is a solution to pollution.
Sometimes it is. I mean, we've run drills in hazmat where sometimes, depending on the strength of the acid or base, you need a large volume of water to take care of that, right? To get it within that pH range. But
I do remember that training.
Yeah, it was drums and drums of water. But luckily for us, with the small amount of acid that was actually on our boots from walking on the floor with the acid, we didn't require a ton of water to actually get it off the boots, because when we checked it with pH paper, we were within our pH range for discharge to our sewer system, which was great for us. It was an easy fix, easy to do.
Yep, that's right. Now, if I remember right, Randy and Jeff, coming out of this call, we had a few takeaways that we realized we had some improvements where we didn't really have the proper tool to get this done in a quick, efficient manner. And it led to some of that out of the box thinking from Jeff. One of those things was we just needed a better way to plug a sidewall on a tank that's not easily within reach and easily plugged without getting the solvent on us. Yeah. So we actually had some responders go to a conference a couple of years ago, and one of the things that came back from was one of the vendors has something called a MagnaSeal patch. Now, those MagnaSeal patches are great for this instance. Why is that, Randy?
Yeah, so this is a product, like I said, you found it at a hazmat conference show in our state. It's a product made by Neothane. And what's really nice about it, it's a thick rubber layer with a rare earth magnet to it. So if it is a tank that's made of, iron, ferric metal that a magnet will work on, this thing sticks to it like crazy. And it's beautiful because these patches come in a variety of different sizes, anywhere from 8x8 to I think they have like 2 foot by 2 foot, maybe even bigger than that. But The magnet's so strong, you can literally throw the patch at the hole. It will adhere to the tank and it will seal against it. And with the strength of the magnet, I think it was like something like 30 or 35 pounds of pressure it can hold back. Do you guys remember?
Right.
Yeah, I believe that's about 30 pounds, correct.
Yeah. And so, like, I think when you go to Neothane's site and look up MagnaSeal, they have product testimonials where one of the things they also have is if you're working with something a little spicier than maybe sulfuric. So, like, I think one of the customer testimonials was HF. They also sell these Teflon slip covers that go over the MagnaSeal that prevents a more chemical protective barrier for their rubberized mat, right? And even with that Teflon cover, that rare earth magnet still holds back 30 to 35 pounds. It's phenomenal.
And it also, you can also put them on storm drains too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
it's correct. You just throw them right down. You don't have to worry about damming and diking around it. It prevents anything from going down in there. And they also come with a variety of applications, like some pick points or ratchet straps that they use on things like rail cars to secure it in place in addition to that magnet.
Right. And like in our case, like they have like a D-ring on it. We could have had it on a pike pole and we could have lifted it up to the leak and sealed the leak. And then we could have used that bigger 2x2 patch. And we could have thrown on the floor drain and we would have been done with this call in like 5 minutes.
I think we tested that, haven't we?
We did in training, but it was one of those things where, we didn't find this product until after this call and the light bulb went off like, oh man, if we had this, that call would have been nothing. We would have like crushed out. I mean, our turn time on this call wasn't, elaborate. It wasn't terrible. I think we were a little over an hour, but it would have turned that down to like 10 minutes and out the door.
Absolutely. And then one of the other products that we use on almost every call and would have helped even if we had the MagnaSeal patch is pig pads. We use those for all of our spills around the facility.
Yeah, pig pad's a great product and we use it quite widely around our facility. And, pig pad has I think it's like 6 different colors of pads, which each color is its own different purpose. And I think around site we use all the different colors. But, it's one of those things where on our hazmat team, we selectively now use pink and yellow.
Now, why is that?
The pink being... That's a great question. So it comes back to calls we've had on the hazmat team in years past where we used to use gray. And gray is a multi-purpose pad. Phenomenal. Works great on just about anything. Water, oils, solvents, you name it, it soaks it up. But what we did find is when we had a high purity or high strength mineral acid, it reacted negatively with the gray pig pad to the point where we had a couple calls where people would use the gray pig pad to absorb up an acid, a strong mineral acid, put it in their waste bin, and then the waste bin would start smoking because the strong acid would start reacting with the gray pig pad. And so because of that, we learned and we actually switched out from the gray pig pads on our hazmat team to the pink one, which is hazmat specific. And so on our trucks, we roll pink and yellow. Pink being a hazmat pad and yellow just being another general purpose. So if it's an acid, we hit it with the pink pad. If it's just about anything else, we can hit it with the pink or yellow pads.
Yep. And in addition to that, they have multiple other varieties and colors and rolls and sheets. Another one that we use in our facility quite frequently is white, which is used for any type of an oil spill.
Yeah. Yeah, because we use oil in just in a lot of things, right? So vacuum, we use it, any machinery, right? So any machinery or mechanical leak is typically going to be an oil for us. And so, yeah, we throw that down quite regularly to make sure we don't have slips, trips, and falls.
Yeah, so that's our show for the day. Let us know what you think of this show. If you have any questions, future topics, or anything you want to discuss with us, you can contact us at hazmatharder@gmail.com.
Yeah, we thank you all for being with us, right? Once again, it's one of those things where industrial hazmat's a passion for us. It's one of those things where we've been on the team a while, and industrial hazmat is one of those things where I don't think industrial teams network enough, and I think we could all learn from one another. So if you're a part of an industrial department, please reach out. We'd love to have you on the call, or we'd love to have you on the show and talk to you over a call about how your department works, and we can share about how ours works.
Yep, that's right. And just to give you guys a little bit of insight to our next episode, we'll be talking about the dangers associated with solvent-rich environments.
Yeah. So stay tuned. Listen in for next episode.